Friends, if you are in the mood for a spine-tingling horror experience and want to watch the super hit movie Annabelle, Creation, 2017, in English, then make sure to like this video. And if you're visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe because we keep bringing you the latest updates and detailed breakdowns of your favorite movies. In today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is none other than Annabelle, Creation, one of the most terrifying entries in the Conjuring Universe. We will talk about what this movie is, how it fits into the horror franchise timeline, and most importantly, where and how you can watch it. Whether it's on an OTT platform or a satellite TV channel, I'll give you the full details so you won't have to waste any time searching. But that's not all. In this video, we will go behind the scenes and dive deep into the technical aspects of the film, from how the haunting cinematography was done, to the eerie sound design and music that brings the scares to life. We'll explore the entire production process, pre-production planning, filming schedules, post-production editing and effects, and even reveal the total budget and box office performance of the film. I'll also give you a spoiler-free summary of the story, followed by a short review where we'll discuss how effective the movie is in delivering its horror elements and whether it lives up to the expectations of fans of the franchise. And of course, we'll go through all the interesting facts about the film, such as hidden details, connections to other films in the series, and fun trivia that fans love. We'll also talk about the star cast, what role each actor played, and how well they performed in bringing their creepy characters to life. So, whether you're a horror movie lover, a fan of the Conjuring series, or just someone curious about Annabelle, Creation, this video is made just for you. That's why I request you to stay with me till the very end, because there's a lot of exciting stuff coming your way. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into the dark and mysterious world of Annabelle, Creation. 2. Plot and narrative. The story of Annabelle, Creation, 2017, unfolds like a slow-burning nightmare creeping into your mind one shadow at a time. It begins with a picture-perfect family moment. A toymaker named Samuel Mullins, his wife Esther, and their sweet little daughter Annabelle, whom they lovingly call Bee. They live a quiet, content life in a farmhouse surrounded by golden fields and warm light. Everything seems fine until tragedy strikes. In a single moment, Bee runs out into the road and is hit by a car. The light disappears. The Mullins world crumbles into darkness, and the house that was once full of joy turns cold and silent. Years pass. The couple, still haunted by the loss of their daughter, open their home to a group of orphaned girls and a kindly nun named Sister Charlotte. From the outside, it seems like a generous act. But the moment the girls arrive at the Mullins house, the atmosphere shifts. The camera lingers on dusty corners, the long hallways creak under every step, and there's that one door, that locked room they are strictly forbidden from entering. You know something's not right, and you're not wrong. The narrative cleverly uses the eyes of the children, especially Janice, a polio-stricken girl in a leg brace, as our main window into the haunted world. Because Janice is limited physically, the tension builds slowly around her. She hears things. She notices strange figures. She's vulnerable. And her vulnerability makes the scares feel more intense, more personal. She becomes the focal point for the supernatural activity, and it's no accident that she's the first one to break the rule and enter that forbidden room. Now, this is where things take a dark turn. Inside the locked room, Bee's old belongings, dolls, notes, clothes, and one very specific doll locked inside a closet sealed with Bible pages. Janice removes the pages, opens the door, and boom, the nightmare begins. But it's not instant. The film plays with tension, letting you feel the weight of the silence, the chill of the stillness. That's what makes the narrative so effective. It doesn't just tell a horror story, it builds a world where evil simmers beneath every surface. Janice begins to experience terrifying visions. She sees Bee. She hears whispers. She's lured to the barn. And then she meets it. The entity. The thing that claimed to be her daughter. What follows is one of the film's most disturbing sequences. Janice is lifted, slammed, and ultimately possessed. And it's not just a ghost having fun. It's something much more powerful, more ancient, more malicious. The demon isn't interested in scaring her. It wants to wear her like a mask. From this point on, the tone of the film shifts. It accelerates. The house becomes a war zone of terror, and every room holds a new nightmare. Janice begins to change. She's quiet. She's cold. Her best friend Linda notices something is very wrong. While the first half of the movie focused on building suspense, the second half unleashes it. And yet, it never loses its emotional core. You care about these girls. You want them to escape. You feel the weight of their fear. There are standout moments scattered throughout the narrative like ticking time bombs. A scarecrow that moves when no one's looking. A demon crawling out from the shadows in the form of a little girl. A stairlift scene that will make you rethink ever using one again. The film doesn't just rely on jump scares. It blends psychological terror with physical horror. The fear is layered. You're not just scared of what's going to pop out, you're terrified of what it all means. The turning point comes when the other girls begin to realize that Janice is no longer Janice. The possession is complete. The demon now walks among them. And while the girls and Sister Charlotte try to find help or escape, the house seems to close in around them. It's alive with evil. Doors slam. Lights flicker. And the sense of dread becomes suffocating. By this point, the film has moved from haunted house mystery to full-blown demonic horror. What's brilliant about Annabelle creation is how it plays with time and mythology. Though it's a prequel, it plants seeds that tie directly into the broader Conjuring Universe. You start noticing names, symbols, and connections that echo into future films. It's like peeling back the first layer of a curse that stretches far beyond this one story. The ending especially rewards fans who've seen the other films. It doesn't just conclude the story, it loops it directly into Annabelle, 2014, and beyond. There's a circular structure to it, and that looping timeline adds an extra chill because you realize this evil never dies. It just changes forms. And the character of the doll itself? It's almost silent the entire film. It doesn't move. It doesn't speak. But it commands the screen. It's like the eye of a storm. Everything chaotic swirls around it. And yet it just sits there, watching, waiting. The film's genius is in making you fear something that technically doesn't do anything, but feels like it could destroy you with a glance. So, does the narrative follow a conventional structure? Yes and no. It uses familiar horror beats. Arrival, discovery, haunting, possession, confrontation, but it layers them with emotional depth, strong character work, and mythological ties that make it feel bigger than a single film. It keeps you guessing, keeps you dreading, and most of all, keeps you glued to your seat. Because once the demon makes its move, all bets are off. And by the time the final scene rolls, you realize you've not just watched a horror story, you've survived it. Absolutely! Let's dive deeper into the rich and layered character development in Annabelle, Creation, 2017, because this movie doesn't just throw its characters into a haunted house and wait for the chaos. No, it crafts each one with intention, depth, and purpose, making their journeys as emotionally compelling as they are terrifying. Let's begin again with Janice, because her arc isn't just central, it's devastating. When we first meet her, she's a sweet, quiet girl trying her best to enjoy life despite her physical limitations. She's recovering from polio, wears a cumbersome leg brace, and constantly lags behind the other girls. It's not just her body that slows her down, it's the invisible weight of being different. She's not bitter, though. She's full of heart, vulnerable but optimistic, and deeply bonded to her best friend, Linda. You can feel Janice's longing to fit in, to be strong, to matter. And that's exactly what makes her such an ideal target for the lurking evil in the house. Janice's transformation is one of the most unsettling in modern horror, not because it's shocking, but because it's gradual and grounded in emotion. The film doesn't rush it. It lets us see the cracks form in her spirit. We watch her curiosity grow as she becomes drawn to the forbidden room. And once the demonic presence starts to manipulate her, it's not instant possession. It's a psychological breakdown. She becomes isolated. She questions her own sanity. She tries to speak up, but no one believes her. And when she's finally overtaken, the heartbreak hits hard because we know her. We remember her innocence. That arc, from hopeful outcast to vessel of pure evil, is tragic. And it's not just scary because a demon is involved. It's scary because we saw her lose herself, piece by piece. Now Linda, Janice's best friend, is just as essential. She's not the loudest or most aggressive of the group. She's small, a little shy, and not exactly a classic horror heroine. But her strength shines in the quiet moments. When Janice starts acting strange, Linda doesn't brush it off. She notices. She cares. And when things take a dark turn, Linda doesn't run from the truth. She confronts it. Her bravery isn't loud or showy. It's pure, instinctive loyalty. She wants to help her friend. She wants to survive. And she wants to understand what's happening, even if it scares her to her core. One of the most gripping scenes in the film is when Linda tries to tell Sister Charlotte that something's wrong with Janice. She's terrified but determined. Her arc isn't about facing ghosts. It's about growing up fast in a world where innocence doesn't guarantee safety. By the end of the film, Linda becomes the audience's anchor, the last beam of light in a house that's all but swallowed by darkness. Her development is subtle but powerful. She starts as a sidekick and ends as a quiet hero. Sister Charlotte brings an adult perspective to the film, and what makes her character stand out is how human she feels. Often in horror, religious figures are either overly dramatic or completely useless. Not here. Sister Charlotte is calm, thoughtful, and strong in ways that go beyond the spiritual. She's been through things. We sense it in her eyes, in the way she responds to the supernatural. She doesn't scream or faint. She investigates. She thinks. When the danger becomes real, she does everything she can to protect the girls, especially Linda. She isn't armed with magic or exorcism skills, but with empathy, instinct, and emotional intelligence. Her moments with the other characters give us a sense of grounding. She's not just fighting evil, she's nurturing broken children. That dual role is what makes her so compelling. Now let's talk about the Mullins couple, because wow, there's a lot under the surface here. On first impression, Samuel Mullins seems like your typical stern homeowner. He's quiet, stiff, and not very welcoming. But slowly, you start to understand the pain underneath his silence. He lost his daughter. His wife is bedridden. His home is haunted by memories, and by something far worse. Samuel isn't distant because he's cold, he's distant because he's broken. His attempt to do something good by welcoming the orphan girls feels like a way to seek redemption. But deep down, he knows he made a terrible mistake. You can feel the guilt eating away at him in every slow glance and heavy sigh. He's not a villain. He's a man who wanted to bring his daughter back and ended up unleashing something unspeakable. And Esther Mullins, though she spends much of the film hidden behind closed doors or lying silently in bed, is one of the most haunting characters of all. Her entire arc is one of regret. Unlike her husband, she doesn't bury the past. She lives in it. She's literally and metaphorically trapped in her room, isolated with the knowledge that the thing wearing her daughter's face isn't really Bea. When she finally reveals the truth, it hits hard. She doesn't just explain the haunting, she confesses. And her confession turns the story from a spooky mystery into a full-blown tragedy. She doesn't get redemption. She doesn't get peace. She's already paid the price, and she knows it. Even the supporting girls, though not deeply explored, each play their part. They aren't background noise. They represent different reactions to trauma and fear. Some cling to each other. Some act out. Some freeze. The film gives them just enough personality that when they scream, we feel it. When they're in danger, we care. What's so smart about Annabelle creation is that every relationship in the film matters. Janice and Linda's friendship is the emotional backbone. Sister Charlotte's protective instinct becomes the story's moral compass. The Mullins' tragic past adds a layer of psychological horror that makes the ghost story feel earned. The characters aren't just pawns on a horror chessboard. They're people. They have flaws, desires, fears, and most importantly, consequences. They don't all survive, but they all leave a mark on the story. The film could have easily leaned into spectacle and forgotten the human side. Instead, it does the opposite. It uses character development to amplify the horror. Because when you care about who's in danger, the danger becomes real. When you understand what's at stake emotionally, every creaking door and flickering light becomes a threat not just to a life, but to a soul. That's what makes Annabelle creation such a standout. It gives its characters the weight of real people. And once that happens, the terror stops being fun and starts feeling personal. Let's crank the dial all the way up and really explore the performances in Annabelle creation, because this isn't just a horror film with creepy shadows and slamming doors. This is a movie where the fear is rooted deep in the characters' eyes. in the way they breathe, walk, tremble, and stare into the dark. Without powerhouse performances, this could have been just another spooky doll flick. But the cast breathes so much life and humanity into the terror that you forget you're watching actors. You're convinced you're trapped in that haunted farmhouse right alongside them. We have to go back to Talitha Bateman, who absolutely anchors the entire movie as Janice. Her role demands a full emotional spectrum: sweetness, shyness, fear, desperation, rage, and finally, pure demonic menace. And she hits every note like she's conducting her own horror symphony. There's this heartbreaking fragility in the way she first presents Janice: awkward posture, timid glances, and that leg brace that reminds us how vulnerable she is. You can see that Janice tries to smile and stay positive, but there's a heaviness behind her eyes, like she's already a little used to being left behind. And when the supernatural elements begin creeping in, Talitha makes you feel every jolt of fear, every moment of uncertainty. She doesn't scream for the sake of it. She reacts. She lets silence linger. Her dread grows in her body language before it ever reaches her face. And then, what a shift when Janice is fully possessed. Talitha pulls off an entirely different character. Her voice drops just a little lower. Her eyes stop blinking as much. Her movements become deliberate, like she's no longer a child, but a puppet for something older, colder, and far more dangerous. It's chilling how seamless the transition is. The moment where she's sitting completely still, eyes empty, whispering threats with a half smile. It's like Talitha Bateman morphs into an entirely different creature. And that is what makes her performance so electric. She doesn't just get taken over by the demon, she invites us to watch it happen. Then there's Lulu Wilson, who plays Linda with a kind of emotional maturity that's rare in child performances. She brings so much depth to a character who could have easily been just the best friend. But Lulu gives Linda a strong internal world. Her bravery, her sense of loyalty, and her heartbreak are all worn openly on her face. She's not some fearless horror movie kid who charges headfirst into danger. No, Linda is scared, confused, but she stands her ground anyway. And the way she portrays that blend of courage and fear, that's real. That's human. One of the most emotionally crushing moments is when Linda realizes something is deeply wrong with Janice, and that maybe, just maybe, her friend isn't coming back. Lulu doesn't overplay it. There's no dramatic outburst. Instead, it's in her quiet horror, the way her voice falters, the way she clutches the doll, trying to understand what's happening. And when she finally takes steps to protect herself, you feel the weight of the choice on her little shoulders. She makes you root for her, not just because she's a good kid, but because she feels real. And her chemistry with Talitha Bateman is completely natural. When their friendship begins to fall apart under supernatural pressure, it's not just scary, it's tragic. Now enter Stephanie Sigman as Sister Charlotte, a character who doesn't just exist to explain lore or be the token adult. Stephanie plays her with remarkable warmth and restraint. She brings a sense of calm, quiet strength to the film. You can tell Sister Charlotte has been through things. Her eyes always look like they're searching, not just for answers, but for ways to protect these girls from a world that keeps letting them down. Sigmund's delivery is soft but authoritative. She never needs to raise her voice. Her concern is believable because you trust her instantly. She becomes the mother figure in a house full of orphans, and when she begins to fear the evil within the house, her reactions never feel exaggerated. They feel earned. And then there's Anthony LaPaglia as Samuel Mullins, who brings an entirely different flavor to the performance roster. His portrayal of the grieving father is not loud, not theatrical, it's all buried pain. Samuel is a man who's lost too much, and he wears that grief like a suit of armor. The way LaPaglia walks through his own home, barely making eye contact, barely speaking, tells you more about the character than any exposition ever could. He's haunted, not just by the doll or the demon, but by his choices. His scenes with the children are distant, uncomfortable. You can tell he wants to connect, but he can't. He's too broken. And later, when the truth comes out, and we understand what he and his wife tried to do to bring their daughter back, LaPaglia makes you feel the full weight of that guilt. He's not a villain. He's just a father who made a desperate, awful mistake. Speaking of guilt, Miranda Otto as Esther Mullins might have fewer scenes, but her performance is among the most powerful in the film. She spends much of it confined to her bed or lurking in shadows, but when she does speak, you hang on to every word. There's a haunted stillness in her. She doesn't scream or panic. She whispers. She mourns. And when she finally reveals the origin of the evil in the house, her voice trembles, just slightly, but it's enough to send a shiver down your spine. Otto sells the torment of a mother who made a pact with darkness and lost her soul in the process. She delivers that pain in such a raw, weary way that it feels like she's aged 20 years from grief alone. Her presence gives the movie's mythology real weight, because you're no longer just hearing a spooky story. You're watching a woman live with the consequences of it. Even the smaller roles, those of the other orphan girls, are handled with care. Each child brings something different to the group dynamic. Some are skeptical, some are loud, some are scared, and together they create a believable social environment. They talk over each other, they whisper rumors, they huddle in the dark, and they scream just the way real kids would. You don't doubt for a second that they're terrified, and that's because the actors sell it without needing big speeches or fancy horror tropes. Let's not forget, Annabelle doesn't move, she doesn't crawl, she doesn't talk, and she doesn't blink. She just sits there. So why are we all terrified of her? Because every actor sells it, every twitch, every gasp, every wide-eyed stare toward that doll. Those are the real special effects. It's the actors who convince you that something's wrong, that you're not safe, that the house is watching you. In a genre where performances often fall second to cheap thrills, Annabelle, creation flips the script. It relies on its actors to bring depth, nuance, and emotional realism. And that's what makes the fear stick with you long after the credits roll. It's not just about what's haunting them. It's about who is being haunted and how deeply they make you care. Alright, let's dive even deeper into David F. Sandberg's direction in Annabelle, creation, because this is where the movie really sets itself apart from the typical horror crowd. Sandberg isn't just waving a camera around hoping for a scare. He's carefully sculpting every moment with a director's eye that's tuned specifically to how suspense works on a psychological level. The way he shapes the tone and mood isn't accidental. It's a finely crafted experience designed to pull you in and keep you on edge long after the screen goes dark. From the very start, Sandberg shows he knows how to play with atmosphere like a virtuoso. The opening scenes in the Mullins house aren't just about establishing setting, they're about wrapping you in this eerie, almost nostalgic mood that feels both inviting and unsettling. It's like stepping into a vintage dollhouse where something just isn't quite right. The warm, sepia-tinged lighting contrasts with the cold undercurrent of loss and mystery that runs through the story. This duality creates a feeling that sticks with you because you never know if the next moment will be a comforting one or a terrifying one. Sandberg uses this tension between warmth and menace to great effect, keeping your nerves taut. He also shows incredible skill in managing pacing, which is absolutely crucial in a horror film that relies so heavily on suspense rather than nonstop action. Sandberg doesn't rush the story or the scares. Instead, he lets dread accumulate slowly, like water rising in a basement. You start off feeling safe, even a little curious about the orphans and their new home, but the unease creeps in quietly and insidiously. The way the story unfolds gives you time to connect with the characters emotionally before pulling the rug out from under you. It's this careful pacing that makes the sudden jolts of terror so effective. They hit harder because you're not numb from constant overstimulation. Sandberg's shot composition is another layer of brilliance. Every frame feels deliberate and loaded with meaning. He often uses long takes with slow, deliberate camera movements that make you feel like a silent observer trapped in the haunted house alongside the characters. The camera doesn't just capture the action, it participates in the tension, gliding through hallways, lingering on doorways, and creeping along ceilings like some unseen presence. This approach draws you deeper into the film's claustrophobic world. You become hyper-aware of every shadow and flicker, waiting for something to leap out. The use of negative space is especially clever. Sandberg uses empty corners and darkened rooms to fuel your imagination, making you fill in the blanks with your own fears. Lighting plays a pivotal role in Sandberg's vision, and he treats it like a character in itself. The interplay of light and shadow in Annabelle, creation creates a visual language of suspense. Harsh light flooding a room suddenly cuts to near total darkness, forcing your eyes to adjust and making you hyper-conscious of what might be lurking just beyond your sight line. In some scenes, the flickering of a candle or the dim glow of a bedside lamp becomes the only thing standing between safety and the unknown. This expert manipulation of light makes the house feel alive, watching, waiting, breathing alongside the characters. Sandberg is also a master of sound design and silence, using them as storytelling tools rather than mere background noise. The absence of sound at key moments heightens tension exponentially. When there's silence, your ears strain to catch the faintest creak, whisper, or footstep. This interplay between sound and silence means you're never quite comfortable. You find yourself holding your breath alongside the characters, waiting for the next sign of danger. When sound breaks the silence, it's often sudden and jarring. Doors slam, glass breaks, eerie music boxes play. Shocks that feel earned rather than cheap. A unique stylistic choice Sandberg makes is his use of perspective and point-of-view shots, which immerse the audience directly in the character's experience. Sometimes you're seeing things from the child's eye level, making the world feel larger, scarier, and more unpredictable. Other times, the camera peers through cracks, over shoulders, or watches silently from the shadows. These shifting perspectives keep you off balance, reinforcing the sense that danger could be lurking just out of sight, anywhere at any time. One of the coolest things about Sandberg's direction is how he balances the supernatural with emotional realism. This is a horror movie about demons and dolls, but it never loses sight of the human story at its core. He directs his actors to play their roles with genuine emotion and subtlety, which grounds the film's more outlandish elements in reality. The relationships between the characters feel authentic, and because of that, the horror feels more personal and immediate. You're not just watching a haunted doll do spooky things, you're watching a family's grief, a child's trauma, and the desperate attempts to protect what's left of their lives. Sandberg's direction keeps those threads intertwined beautifully. The way he handles exposition and lore is another high point. Instead of dropping heavy backstory through clunky dialogue or obvious flashbacks, Sandberg uses visual storytelling. Items like the music box, the locked room, the old photographs, and the way the characters interact with the doll all build the mythology naturally. He trusts the audience to piece together the puzzle without spelling everything out, which makes the mystery more engaging and immersive. When the history of Annabelle finally comes to light, it feels like a payoff that's been simmering under the surface the whole time, not a sudden info dump. And then there's Sandberg's clever nod to the broader Conjuring Universe. He sprinkles subtle references that fans will appreciate, but he never lets them overshadow the main story. This film can stand on its own feet, and Sandberg ensures that newcomers aren't lost or overwhelmed by franchise lore. He maintains a consistent tone and story vision, tying into the larger universe without becoming a hostage to it. Even the set design and props feel like extensions of Sandberg's directorial vision. The creaky old farmhouse, the dusty attic, the peeling wallpaper, the antique furniture, all of these details are meticulously chosen to build a lived-in, eerie environment. The doll itself, Annabelle, is framed like a sinister centerpiece throughout the film. Sandberg uses her presence sparingly but effectively, letting her almost passive stillness become the source of relentless dread. The way the camera lingers on her cracked porcelain face, her lifeless eyes, and her frozen smile keeps the tension simmering. Ultimately, David F. Sandberg shapes Annabelle, creation into more than just a ghost story. He crafts it as a fully immersive emotional experience, one that pulls you inside a house full of secrets and shadows. His direction blends classical horror elements with modern storytelling finesse, making every scare feel fresh, every moment suspenseful, and every character's fear genuine. He knows when to whisper, when to shout, and when to sit in silence with the audience's nerves stretched tight. The result is a movie that sticks with you, not just because it's scary, but because it's smart, stylish, and deeply human beneath all the darkness. Let's really dig into the cinematography of Annabelle, creation, because it's not just about pointing a camera and capturing action, it's about painting a whole atmosphere that pulls you into the heart of the horror. Maxime Alexander's work behind the lens turns this movie into a visual playground of dread, where every shot, every flicker of light, and every shadow is meticulously crafted to mess with your nerves and keep you glued to the screen. Right from the get-go, the camera angles set the tone for the entire movie. Alexander loves to put the camera at unusual heights and perspectives that make you feel off-kilter. For example, when the story centers on the orphans and Janice, the camera often sits low, close to their eye level. This choice doesn't just make you feel like you're seeing the world through their eyes. It also amplifies their vulnerability. Suddenly, everything around them looks huge, overwhelming, and full of hidden threats. It's like the camera is shrinking you down to the size of a child, and all the shadows in the house grow monstrous. And then, flip the angle to high shots looking down on the characters, making them appear small and trapped inside the vast, decaying house. This dance between low and high angles is a visual metaphor for the power dynamics at play, how the characters are caught between forces bigger than themselves, both literally and figuratively. The framing throughout the film is almost claustrophobic in its precision. The characters are often squeezed into corners of the frame, or partially hidden behind objects, emphasizing their isolation and entrapment. Imagine a scene where a child is framed through a doorway, or the edge of a broken chair blocks part of the frame. The world suddenly feels fragmented and unsafe. These compositions create an ever-present feeling of being watched or stalked. The framing becomes a way to visually whisper to the audience, something is lurking just beyond what you can see, and it's waiting. This technique also forces your eyes to dart around the screen, searching every dark corner and empty space, which ramps up the tension. Lighting in Annabelle, creation is where the movie really flexes its muscles. Alexander's use of light and shadow doesn't just illuminate the scenes, it tells the story itself. The film balances warm, golden tones with deep, cold shadows in a way that makes the house feel alive, breathing with menace. Think about how a flickering candle casts giant, dancing shadows on peeling wallpaper, or how the sunlight slanting through dusty windows creates long, eerie silhouettes that crawl across the floors. The lighting becomes almost a character of its own, sometimes protective, sometimes threatening. The interplay between light and darkness echoes the film's themes of innocence versus evil, safety versus danger. You never feel fully comfortable because the light is always flickering, fragile, and unreliable. In some scenes, natural light is used brilliantly to add a layer of complexity. Sunlight streaming through windows seems peaceful at first, but those long shadows and the dust floating in the beams make it feel like the light is exposing every hidden corner, every secret. It reminds you that darkness isn't just a nighttime thing. Danger can invade the brightest moments. It's this contrast that adds richness to the atmosphere, making you realize that fear isn't only lurking in the shadows, it can sneak in with the day. Some moments stand out as pure cinematographic poetry. For example, the tense basement scene where Janice ventures into the darkness is shot with slow, deliberate movements that mimic her hesitation and growing fear. The camera glides alongside her, tight in the frame, as the dim light barely pushes back the shadows. You can almost feel the cold air and the oppressive silence closing in. No jump scares here, just pure, slow-building dread. The choice to linger in these moments gives the horror more weight and lets the audience soak in the atmosphere. Mirrors and reflections are used cleverly to mess with your head. The cinematography loves to show characters' reflections where something sinister might be lurking just out of frame, or where what you see in the mirror doesn't quite match reality. These shots play with your expectations and add a surreal, ghostly layer to the visual storytelling. They make you question what's real and what's a trick, keeping your mind spinning and your heart racing. The camera movement itself is restrained but purposeful. There's no frantic shaky cam or fast cuts here. Instead, the camera glides smoothly through rooms and hallways, following characters like a silent observer. This slow, stalking movement mimics the relentless nature of the evil presence in the house. It's always there, just beyond sight, patient and waiting. The pacing of the camera movement mirrors the film's slow burn narrative, building tension incrementally, so when scares come, they hit hard. The color grading adds one more layer to this rich tapestry. The muted, desaturated color palette gives the film a vintage, slightly faded look that feels like you're watching an old memory or a ghost story told around a campfire. This look ties beautifully into the film's setting and themes of lost innocence and lingering trauma. It's not just pretty aesthetics, it's storytelling in color, wrapping the whole movie in a veil of nostalgia and unease. All these elements combine to make the cinematography not just a technical achievement, but an emotional experience. It's like the camera is breathing alongside the characters, sharing their fear, their isolation, and their desperate hope. It makes you not just see the haunted house, but feel it, the cold, the shadows, the silence, the unseen eyes watching every move. The cinematography in Annabelle creation turns the film from just a scary story into a fully immersive journey through a world where every corner hides a secret, and every frame is charged with suspense and dread. It's a visual feast that keeps you on the edge, heart pounding, long after the lights come back on. Let's really dive deep into the editing and pacing of Annabelle creation, because this is where the movie's heartbeat truly lives. Editing isn't just about piecing scenes together, it's the invisible hand that controls how you feel every second you're watching. In horror, this rhythm can make the difference between a snooze fest and a nail-biting thrill ride, and here, the editors skillfully manipulate time and tension like true maestros. Right from the opening scenes, the editing takes its time. It's not rushing you into the scares, but instead eases you into the eerie world of the film with a slow, methodical pace. This is crucial because the movie is all about building an atmosphere thick with dread, and that can only happen if you're allowed to soak in the details, the creaky floorboards, the faint flicker of candlelight, the uneasy silence hanging in the air. The cuts here are smooth and measured, letting long, lingering shots breathe. You almost feel like you're tiptoeing through the haunted house yourself, senses on high alert, every shadow and sound amplified. This slow pacing isn't boring. It's suspense in disguise, a way to lull you into a false sense of calm before the terror ramps up. When the supernatural elements start creeping into the story, the editing shifts gears but never loses control. Quick cuts and sharp transitions slice through the previously calm flow like sudden jolts of electricity. But these aren't just random jump cuts thrown in to startle you, they're carefully timed punches designed to jolt your nerves and make you jump out of your seat. The pacing here speeds up just enough to raise your heart rate without overwhelming you. There's a balance between fast and slow moments that keeps the tension taut, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. You get that classic horror rhythm, a slow build-up of anxiety, a sudden spike of terror, then a brief release, only to have the tension climb all over again. What's really clever is how the editors manage transitions between the quiet, character-driven moments and the chaotic, scary scenes. It's not a harsh switch from calm to chaos. It flows naturally, which is why you stay engaged instead of zoning out. This ebb and flow mirrors the emotional journey of the characters perfectly. They start curious, then cautious, then downright terrified. The editing guides you through this emotional roller coaster smoothly, making the scares feel earned rather than forced. Another smart move is how the editing handles the timing of reveals. Horror thrives on anticipation, and here, the editors know just when to hold a shot to make you squirm. Sometimes they'll keep the camera locked on a seemingly innocent object or an empty hallway for a split second longer than expected, ramping up your anxiety until you're practically screaming, "Something's coming." Other times, they cut away just before the scare, forcing your imagination to fill in the blanks, and often your mind imagines something way worse than what actually appears. This masterful use of timing plays with your expectations and keeps you guessing, heightening the suspense without relying solely on cheap jump scares. Dialogue scenes benefit from smart pacing too. Instead of dragging or feeling rushed, conversations flow naturally with well-timed cuts that capture reactions, subtle expressions, and emotional beats. This keeps the audience connected to the characters and invested in their fates. Meanwhile, moments of silence are given space to grow, reminding us that sometimes the absence of sound is the most terrifying thing of all. The film's climax shows off the editor's skill in managing pacing on a grand scale. As the tension peaks, the cuts become quicker and more urgent, mirroring the chaos and desperation unfolding on screen. Yet, even here, the pacing doesn't feel frantic or confusing. It's intense and focused, pulling you right into the heart of the nightmare. The rhythm of the editing here mirrors the characters' panic and struggle, making you feel like you're trapped alongside them, breathless and terrified. Subtle editing techniques, like slow dissolves and lingering close-ups during reflective moments, add a dreamlike texture to the film. These moments contrast beautifully with the sharp, abrupt cuts of the horror sequences, creating a rhythm that's unpredictable and keeps the viewer on edge. The contrast between fluid, calm editing and sudden, jarring cuts reflects the story's constant shifts between normalcy and terror. Even the sound design works hand in hand with the editing pace. Silence and ambient noise are timed perfectly to punctuate cuts, creating an immersive experience where sound and image combine to manipulate your emotions. The editors know when to let silence stretch just long enough to make your heart race before the next terrifying sound or visual assault hits. Ultimately, the editing and pacing in Annabelle creation craft an emotional roller coaster that never lets up. It's a slow, creeping dread that blossoms into sudden, pulse-pounding scares and then retreats just enough to build suspense all over again. The rhythm controls how you experience the story on a gut level, keeping you tense, engaged, and invested in the character's plight. This masterful flow between calm and chaos, anticipation and release, is what transforms the film from a simple ghost story into a gripping, edge-of-your-seat thriller that haunts you long after the credits roll. Let's dive even deeper into the world of Annabelle, creation as soundtrack and score, because this is where the movie truly speaks to you on a subconscious level, shaping every moment without you even realizing it. Composer Joseph Bishara didn't just slap some eerie sounds together. He crafted an entire oral universe that breathes life into the film's haunted atmosphere. The music here isn't background noise. It's an active, living part of the story, a shadowy presence that follows you through every scene. Right from the opening moments, the soundtrack establishes a mood that's more unsettling than outright scary. Instead of overwhelming you with a blaring orchestra or obvious spooky tunes, Bishara opts for subtle, textured layers of sound that feel like they're crawling just beneath the surface. Think of it as the sonic equivalent of a whisper in a dark room, quiet but impossible to ignore. These early sounds are composed of low drones, dissonant strings, and soft, irregular piano notes that create a sense of unease without giving too much away. This approach builds a slow-burning tension, luring you in with a quiet menace that grows stronger as the story unfolds. One of the most fascinating aspects of a score is its use of recurring motifs, little musical phrases, or sounds that pop up repeatedly to anchor the supernatural elements of the film. These motifs act like musical fingerprints for the evil forces at work, signaling their presence even before they appear visually. For example, a haunting minor key melody, or a distant, wavering tone might start out barely noticeable, but as the film progresses, these motifs return louder, distorted, or twisted, reminding you that the darkness is never far away. This technique creates a sense of continuity and inevitability, weaving the narrative threads together in a way that keeps the audience emotionally tethered to the story's creeping dread. The soundtrack's mastery shines particularly in its use of silence and restraint, which are some of the most powerful tools in horror music. There are many moments where the music simply drops out entirely, leaving only the ambient noises of a haunted house, the creaking floorboards, faint whispers, the sound of a distant door closing. These silences are like loaded pauses in a conversation. They heighten your anticipation and sharpen your senses. You become hyper-aware of every tiny noise, every shadow, every breath, because the absence of music creates a vacuum that your mind instinctively fills with fear. The contrast between these quiet moments and the sudden return of music or sound effects is jarring in the best possible way, making the scares hit much harder than if there was a constant musical background. When the score does make its presence known during tense or terrifying scenes, it's with an almost surgical precision. Sharp, discordant bursts of sound slice through the quiet like a knife, accompanying jump scares or moments of supernatural chaos. But these musical strikes aren't just loud noises thrown in to startle you, they're carefully designed sonic shocks that engage you on both a physical and emotional level. The music mimics the character's rising panic and the story's escalating danger, pulling you into the chaos so completely that you can almost feel your own heartbeat speeding up. This interplay between calm silence and sudden bursts of music creates a push-pull effect that keeps you constantly on edge, never quite sure when the next scare will come. Beyond the scares, the soundtrack also plays a crucial role in conveying the emotional depth of the film. There are hauntingly beautiful passages woven into the score that underscore moments of sorrow, loss, and vulnerability among the characters. These softer, more melancholic melodies remind us that beneath the horror lies a deeply human story about pain and grief. The music adds layers of feeling that might not be explicitly spoken in the dialogue, giving the film a richer emotional texture. This depth makes the terror feel more real and grounded because you care about the people experiencing it, not just the scares themselves. Another brilliant aspect is how the music mirrors the visual style and movement of the film. When the camera slowly pans through dark corridors or lingers on ominous shadows, the score echoes this pace with creeping, sustained notes or trembling vibrations. It's as if the music is stalking the characters alongside the camera, matching their fear step for step. This synchronization between sound and image creates a seamless, immersive experience where the boundaries between what you see and what you hear blur. The soundtrack doesn't just accompany the visuals, it completes them, turning every frame into a sensory-rich moment. The sound design, which includes ambient noises and eerie effects, works hand in hand with the score to build a fully immersive world. Every creak, whisper, and distant thud is carefully layered beneath or alongside the music, creating a dense soundscape that traps you inside the haunted house. The blend is so smooth you might not even realize where the music ends and sound effects begin, but together they form an aural web that pulls you deeper into the story's chilling atmosphere. What's especially impressive is that the music never feels overwhelming or overdone. It respects the pacing and tone of the film, stepping back when silence or ambient sound are more effective and stepping forward only to heighten key moments. This restraint makes the score feel natural and essential rather than intrusive or manipulative. It's a perfect example of how horror music should work, quietly influencing your emotions and tension levels without screaming for attention. In the end, the soundtrack and score of Annabelle creation are like the film's invisible puppeteers, pulling strings beneath the surface to shape your experience. They wrap around the visuals and story, turning simple scenes into nerve-wracking, emotionally charged moments. With its clever use of motifs, masterful silence, and well-timed musical jolts, the score transforms the movie from just a ghost story into a fully immersive, heart-pounding journey where fear is not only seen but deeply heard and felt. Let's peel back the layers of Annabelle creation a bit more because beneath all the chilling scares and eerie moments, this film packs some surprisingly rich themes and messages that give a story much more depth than you might expect at first glance. Horror movies often flirt with deeper ideas, but here those ideas are woven tightly into the fabric of the film, making it not just a spooky ride, but a reflection on some very human struggles. First and foremost, the theme of loss and grief sits right at the heart of the story. The tragic death of the dollmaker's daughter is not just a plot device, it's the emotional core that ripples through the entire film. This loss is portrayed not as a neat, closed chapter, but as a haunting wound that affects every character involved. It's a reminder that grief isn't something you just get over. It lingers, twists your perceptions, and can even open doors to darkness, both metaphorically and literally in the film's supernatural world. The way grief manifests here feels authentic and raw, making the horror feel personal. You realize the movie isn't just about an evil doll, but about how pain and sorrow can invite evil in, which turns the supernatural elements into extensions of very real human emotions. Closely tied to this is the theme of guilt and redemption. Characters are haunted not just by ghosts, but by their own past mistakes and regrets. This isn't just a story about external threats, it's about internal battles too. Whether it's a character wrestling with feelings of responsibility for something gone wrong, or trying to atone for past sins, the film explores how guilt can imprison us. It shows how unresolved remorse becomes a kind of spiritual darkness, sometimes as terrifying as any monster. This makes the horror more complex because it's not just about external danger, but about the psychological weight each character carries. Redemption, then, becomes a crucial, if difficult, possibility, a way to break free from that darkness, but one that requires courage and confrontation. The idea of innocence corrupted is another fascinating thread running through the movie. Children and vulnerable individuals are often the focus, and the film uses this to tap into a deep, almost primal fear that evil can prey on the purest and most defenseless among us. The Annabelle doll itself is the ultimate symbol of this corrupted innocence, something that should be harmless and even comforting turned into a vessel of malevolence. This inversion creates a powerful contrast that heightens the unease and forces viewers to question appearances. It plays on the unsettling notion that evil often hides behind familiar, everyday objects or people, striking when you least expect it. This theme adds a chilling moral complexity to the film, reminding us that darkness can lurk in the most unexpected places. There's also a fascinating exploration of faith, belief, and superstition woven throughout the story. Characters confront supernatural phenomena that defy logic, and their reactions range from denial to desperation to deep faith. This tension between skepticism and belief isn't just a side note. It drives much of the narrative tension and character choices. The film invites viewers to consider how belief shapes our reality and responses to the unknown. It asks questions like, what happens when we face forces beyond our understanding? Can belief itself become a weapon or a shield? This philosophical undercurrent gives the horror a more thoughtful edge, encouraging you to reflect on your own relationship with fear and the unexplained. The film also subtly comments on family, protection, and sacrifice. The relationships between the characters, especially between caregivers and children, highlight the powerful human instinct to protect those we love. This love is portrayed as both a strength and a vulnerability because the very bonds that give life meaning can also be exploited by evil forces. The protective instinct fuels much of the plot, raising the stakes emotionally and creating moments where fear is mixed with tenderness. This theme grounds the supernatural horror in real, relatable emotions, making the scares hit harder because they threaten not just lives but the safety of loved ones. What makes these themes so compelling is how they're integrated seamlessly into the story. The film doesn't hit you over the head with moral lessons or heavy-handed messages. Instead, it lets these ideas simmer quietly beneath the surface, enriching the narrative and character motivations without pulling you out of the spooky atmosphere. You're entertained and creeped out, but at the same time, you're invited to think about bigger questions about pain, loss, faith, and the nature of evil. Additionally, there's a subtle exploration of fear itself, how it can paralyze or propel us, how it shapes our actions and perceptions. The characters' fears are both external, the supernatural threat, and internal, their own doubts and regrets. The movie plays with this duality, showing fear as both an enemy and a catalyst for courage. This layered treatment of fear makes the horror experience richer and more psychologically engaging. So, while on the surface Annabelle, creation is about a haunted doll and spooky happenings, its true power lies in these deeper themes that resonate beyond the jump scares. The film invites you to confront not just the ghosts in the house, but the ghosts in the heart, loss, guilt, innocence lost, faith tested, and the fierce protective love that defines us. It's these thoughtful undercurrents that help the story linger long after the lights come back on. When diving deeper into the visual effects and CGI of Annabelle, creation, what really stands out is the filmmaker's masterful understanding that horror thrives on atmosphere and subtlety rather than bombastic spectacle. The effects are crafted with a delicate balance, designed to draw you into the eerie world without ever shouting, "Look at the CGI." Instead, they gently pull you in, making the supernatural elements feel like natural, if terrifying, parts of the film's reality. One of the most remarkable aspects is the heavy reliance on practical effects, which is a choice that pays off big time in the genre. The doll itself, Annabelle, is a physical object, painstakingly designed and brought to life with such care that it practically feels like a character in its own right. There's something about the weight, texture, and imperfections of a real prop that digital effects struggle to replicate. When Annabelle sits in a dimly lit room or slowly turns her head, it's not a collection of pixels on a screen, but an object that exists in space. This tangibility makes the doll far more unsettling because it occupies the same physical world as the characters and, by extension, the audience. You can almost imagine the cold touch of the doll, making every scene with it feel creepier and more immediate. The filmmakers use practical effects not just for the doll, but for various spooky set pieces, creaking doors, flickering candles, dusty old furniture, that all contribute to the lived-in, haunted atmosphere. These elements feel grounded and real, which heightens the sense of immersion and makes the supernatural occurrences feel like they're intruding into a believable space rather than a constructed fantasy. It's a clever way to build tension because when something physically present suddenly moves or shifts, your brain registers it as more credible and therefore more frightening. That said, the CGI isn't absent. In fact, it's deployed with smart precision. The visual effects team steps in primarily to do what practical effects cannot, create movements and supernatural phenomena that defy physics and human capability. For example, when the doll moves on its own, or when ghostly apparitions appear and vanish, digital effects allow for smooth, unnatural motions that give a chilling sense of otherworldliness. These effects are subtle and often happen in the blink of an eye, but their impact is profound because they hint at a force beyond human control. The CGI here serves as the whisper behind the door, the flicker in the corner of your eye, something you sense more than fully see, which is exactly how horror should operate. One of the most impressive uses of CGI is in the way it enhances atmosphere rather than creating flashy moments. Shadows stretch and morph in unnatural ways, the air seems to shimmer with unseen energy, and sometimes the environment itself feels almost alive with menace. These visual cues are understated yet powerful, encouraging the viewer's imagination to fill in the blanks, which can be far scarier than any overt visual. This technique keeps the tension high without resorting to cheap tricks, making the film's supernatural elements feel woven into the fabric of the world rather than pasted on top. The integration of visual effects with lighting and cinematography is another highlight. Clever lighting choices, dim, flickering, or filtered through textured surfaces, work hand in hand with both practical and digital effects to create scenes that feel hauntingly real. For example, a shadow cast by a candle might suddenly stretch too long or shift unnaturally thanks to subtle CGI enhancement, but it never feels out of place because the lighting sets the perfect stage for it. This harmonious blend makes every frame a study in eerie mood setting, where the line between natural and supernatural blurs just enough to keep you on edge. What's really fascinating is the way these effects trick your perception. At times, you're unsure whether what you're seeing is a simple trick of the light, a physical object moving unexpectedly, or a ghostly presence digitally inserted. This ambiguity is key to the film's creeping dread. Your mind races to explain the unexplained, and that uncertainty fuels the tension. The layering of practical and digital effects creates a sensory puzzle that keeps your attention and heightens the suspense, making every scene feel alive with hidden threats. In addition to big moments, the effects shine in the little details that add psychological depth. Tiny twitches of the doll's fingers, a barely perceptible blink, or a subtle head tilt are digitally enhanced to push the uncanny valley just enough to make you uneasy. These small, almost imperceptible movements transform Annabelle from a mere object into a sinister presence with a personality of her own. The effect is unnerving because it defies normal expectations. Dolls don't move, right? But here, they do, and those small movements linger in your mind, making you question what might be lurking just beyond the frame. The movie also uses visual effects to emphasize the contrast between innocence and evil. The doll, a child's toy, becomes a vessel of darkness, and the visual effects subtly amplify this transformation. Soft glows, unnatural shadows, or sudden shifts in lighting all serve to highlight how something familiar and harmless can turn into something terrifying. This visual storytelling enhances the film's thematic core and deepens the emotional impact of the horror. In terms of pacing and placement, the effects never feel gratuitous or overused. They appear at moments where tension is already building or when a scare is about to land, ensuring they have maximum impact. This careful timing shows a sophisticated understanding of horror rhythm, the idea that the anticipation and build-up are just as important as the payoff. By saving the more pronounced effects for key scenes, the film keeps you constantly on edge without overwhelming your senses. So, whether it's the tangible creepiness of the doll brought to life with practical craftsmanship, or the ghostly, unnatural movements enhanced by subtle CGI Annabelle, creation uses its visual effects to craft a chilling, immersive world. The combination of old-school practical effects and modern digital magic creates a layered experience where every shadow might be hiding something sinister, and every flicker of movement keeps you guessing. It's a brilliant example of how visual effects can serve a story by deepening atmosphere and tension instead of just showing off flashy tricks. When it comes to Annabelle creation, the set design and locations are absolute stars in their own right, crafting a world that feels not only believable but richly atmospheric and packed with storytelling in every corner. From the moment you step into the film's environments, you're transported to a place that's hauntingly real yet dripping with ominous undertones, thanks to meticulous attention to detail in every room, hallway, and piece of furniture. The main settings, especially the old farmhouse where much of the story unfolds, are practically characters themselves. This isn't just some generic spooky house slapped onto the screen, it's a fully realized space that feels lived in and layered with history. The creaky wooden floors, peeling wallpaper, antique furniture, and dust-covered knickknacks all work together to build a believable home that's been untouched for years, perfect for a story steeped in mystery and supernatural dread. Every nook and cranny seems to hide secrets, and the production design makes sure the house breathes with a subtle sense of unease. The use of worn textures and muted, desaturated colors in the sets amplifies the feeling of decay and forgotten time. You get the sense that this house has witnessed countless tragedies and is steeped in sorrow, which adds a powerful emotional weight to the story. The faded floral patterns on curtains, the old photographs on the walls, and the assortment of vintage objects scattered around aren't just background decoration, they tell their own silent stories, enriching the narrative without a single word spoken. Locations beyond the house, such as the eerie workshop where the doll is crafted, add further layers to the world. This space is cluttered with tools, doll parts, and strange curiosities, giving it a workshop meets laboratory vibe that perfectly fits the twisted origins of Annabelle. The chaos and clutter feel authentic, like a real craftsman's domain, but there's also something unnerving about how much life seems to pulse through those inanimate objects. It's a place where creativity and darkness collide, and the production design captures that tension beautifully. The film's outdoor settings also deserve a shout-out. The overgrown gardens, rustling trees, and fog-laden fields surrounding the farmhouse create a stark contrast with the claustrophobic interiors, expanding the film's atmosphere. These exterior locations aren't just pretty backdrops, they're carefully chosen and designed to evoke a sense of isolation and vulnerability. When characters step outside, the vastness and unpredictability of nature add to the suspense, making you feel that danger could be lurking just beyond the tree line. What's really clever about the set design is how it plays with light and shadow. The interiors are often dimly lit, with light filtering through heavy curtains or flickering from candles and old lamps, casting long, creepy shadows that seem to move on their own. This interplay of light and dark not only adds visual interest but also heightens the film's eerie mood, making every corner a potential hiding spot for something sinister. The production design team clearly understood that in horror, what you don't see is just as important as what you do. Props are another crucial piece of the puzzle, and Annabelle creation nails it with an assortment of period-appropriate items that root the story firmly in its era while also contributing to the creepy vibe. From old-fashioned toys and trinkets to everyday household items that look like they've been untouched for decades, every prop feels thoughtfully selected and placed. These details ground the supernatural elements in a tangible reality, making the world feel consistent and immersive. The way the production design interacts with the characters is subtle but powerful. Spaces like the children's bedrooms, cluttered with toys and personal belongings, create emotional resonance and a sense of vulnerability. You see these intimate spaces invaded by darkness, which makes the horror feel more personal and impactful. The sets aren't just pretty or spooky backgrounds, they actively participate in the story, amplifying the characters' fears and the film's themes. In essence, the set design and locations in Annabelle creation do an incredible job of building a world that feels both authentic and unsettling. The attention to detail, the use of texture, light, and color, and the thoughtful placement of props all come together to create environments that tell stories on their own. They pull the audience deeper into the film's universe, making every creak, shadow, and flicker of light feel loaded with meaning and potential menace. The production design isn't just about creating a spooky atmosphere, it's about crafting a living, breathing world where the horror feels real and immediate. When it comes to the dialogue and script in Annabelle creation, the film takes an interesting approach that fits perfectly with its creepy, slow-burn style. The conversations aren't flashy or overly clever, but they carry a quiet weight that helps build tension and develop the characters without ever feeling forced or unnatural. The script leans into naturalistic exchanges, which means the dialogue often feels like something people might actually say, especially given the film's 1950s setting. This grounded tone helps the horror elements feel more believable, making the scares hit harder because you're fully invested in the characters and their world. What's refreshing is that the dialogue rarely feels like it's just there to deliver exposition or explain the plot. Instead, it works in subtle ways to reveal relationships, fears, and motivations. For example, the way the characters speak to each other, sometimes tender, sometimes tense, adds emotional layers beneath the surface horror. These moments create a contrast that makes the supernatural elements stand out even more starkly. When characters exchange quiet, heartfelt lines, it reminds you that this isn't just a jump scare machine but a story about people caught in terrifying circumstances. The script also does a neat job of balancing moments of innocence with creeping dread. The children's lines, in particular, often carry a chilling undertone. Their simple, sometimes naive statements gain new meaning when you consider the dark forces around them. This layering makes their dialogue unexpectedly powerful, as something that sounds sweet on the surface can feel deeply unsettling once the context sinks in. The innocence of the kids juxtaposed with the malevolent presence of the doll creates a compelling dynamic that keeps you on edge. While the script doesn't necessarily go for sharp wit or snappy one-liners, it has its share of memorable moments, lines that stick with you because of their emotional weight or eerie delivery. These moments aren't bombastic but quietly effective, often delivered in hushed tones or in the midst of tense silence. It's the kind of writing that sneaks up on you, rather than hitting you over the head. For example, simple warnings or offhand comments about the doll's behavior can suddenly feel like ominous clues that something far worse is lurking just out of sight. The pacing of the dialogue is another interesting aspect. It's measured and deliberate, allowing conversations to breathe and emotions to simmer. This slower pace works well in a horror context because it builds anticipation and lets the audience absorb the growing sense of dread. The characters don't rush through their lines but often speak with pauses, hesitation, or careful choice of words, which adds realism and tension. It's the kind of dialogue that makes you lean in, waiting for what's not being said as much as what is. The script also respects the period setting without overdoing it. The language feels appropriate for the 1950s, but never feels stilted or artificial. This careful balance helps immerse you in the world while keeping the dialogue accessible and relatable. The characters sound like real people of that era, which enhances the film's authenticity and makes the horror more grounded. In addition, the script uses silence and minimal dialogue effectively. Sometimes, what's left unsaid or the quiet pauses between lines speak volumes. These moments give the audience space to imagine the unseen horrors and heighten the suspense. It's a clever way to use the script, not just for what is spoken, but also for the atmosphere created by what is not. All in all, the dialogue and script in Annabelle creation aren't about flashy lines or clever banter. They're about crafting a believable world filled with characters whose words carry emotional weight and subtle hints of the terror to come. The writing's strength lies in its simplicity and restraint, creating an intimate, chilling experience where every line counts and silence speaks as loudly as words. Annabelle creation might seem, at first glance, like just another spooky horror flick about a possessed doll, but if you dig a little deeper, you'll find it's quietly weaving in some interesting social and cultural threads that reflect broader human fears and concerns. The film isn't shouting a political message from the rooftops, but it definitely taps into timeless anxieties about family, loss, and the vulnerability of innocence, ideas that resonate strongly in any era, including our own. One of the most striking aspects is how the film deals with the theme of grief and trauma. The characters are haunted not just by a supernatural force, but by very real, human pain, loss of loved ones, shattered families, and the desperate hope to find safety and normalcy again. This emotional undercurrent adds a layer of depth to the horror, making it about more than just scares. It's about how trauma can linger and manifest in dark ways. In a culture increasingly open to discussing mental health and emotional struggles, the movie's portrayal of grief feels timely and relatable, even if it's wrapped in supernatural trappings. The film also subtly explores ideas about trust and protection, especially within the family unit. The characters' relationships highlight the fragility of safety and how fear can infiltrate even the most intimate spaces, like a home meant to be a sanctuary. In today's world, where concerns about safety and trust are prevalent in many conversations, this theme hits close to home. It reminds us that sometimes the scariest things aren't just monsters in the dark, but the vulnerabilities we face in our personal lives. Another interesting cultural layer is the film's setting in a post-war era, which reflects a time of upheaval, uncertainty, and rebuilding. Although it doesn't directly tackle historical politics, the atmosphere carries echoes of a society recovering from trauma and trying to find stability. This backdrop adds richness to the story and offers a subtle commentary on resilience in difficult times. It's like the film is saying that evil, whether supernatural or human-made, often takes root in moments of instability and fear. The movie also touches on the tension between faith and doubt. Characters grapple with their beliefs as they confront inexplicable horrors, reflecting a broader cultural dialogue about spirituality, skepticism, and the search for meaning in chaotic circumstances. This theme is woven in naturally, without heavy-handed preaching, allowing viewers to engage with these questions on their own terms. It's a subtle nod to how horror often serves as a battleground for larger existential ideas. While Annabelle, Creation doesn't explicitly engage with contemporary politics or social issues like some more overtly political films, its exploration of universal human experiences, fear, loss, protection, and faith, feels genuine and unforced. These themes are integrated seamlessly into the narrative, enriching the story without distracting from the horror. They add emotional weight and invite viewers to reflect on their own experiences and cultural context while being entertained. In a way, the film's social and cultural commentary works best by staying in the background, like a whisper beneath the screams. It doesn't lecture or moralize but creates a space where deeper ideas about human vulnerability and resilience can emerge naturally through the characters and their struggles. This subtlety makes the film feel more authentic and allows it to connect with audiences on multiple levels, both as a chilling ghost story and as a reflection on the darker sides of the human condition. So while you might come for the scares, you might leave thinking a bit more about what really haunts us in life, loss, fear, and the fragile bonds that keep us safe. It's this blend of classic horror thrills with quiet emotional insight that gives Annabelle, Creation a bit more bite beneath its creepy exterior. Annabelle, Creation dives headfirst into the haunted doll horror subgenre, and it's fascinating to see how it plays with the familiar tropes that fans expect while also sneaking in some fresh twists that keep the story from feeling stale. At first glance, it ticks many of the classic boxes. A creepy old house, a sinister doll that seems possessed, kids in danger, and that creeping sense of evil lurking just beneath the surface. But what makes the film intriguing is how it respects those genre conventions without becoming a paint-by-numbers horror flick. The movie knows that the haunted doll setup is iconic, so instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, it focuses on doing what it does well with style and atmosphere. It leans heavily into suspense and slow-building dread rather than non-stop jump scares or over-the-top gore. This pacing lets tension simmer and bubble under the surface, which is a smart move because it allows viewers to really feel the unease grow organically. The film's timing is deliberate, making you wait for the scare instead of throwing it at you, which is a classic but effective horror technique. However, the film doesn't just play it safe. It adds layers by exploring the backstory of the doll and its origins in a way that gives it more depth than the typical evil object cliché. This prequel approach adds a sense of mythology and history, turning the doll into more than just a scary prop. It becomes a symbol of dark forces at work, tangled with grief, loss, and vengeance. This gives the story emotional stakes that go beyond the usual haunted object scares, which helps the film stand out within the crowded horror landscape. The balance between suspense and drama is handled with care. While the film delivers the expected tense moments and creepy visuals, it also invests time in character development and emotional beats. This focus on human drama grounds the supernatural elements and makes the horror feel more personal and impactful. The kids aren't just victims waiting to be scared. They have relationships, fears, and hopes that the story respects. This emotional grounding gives the scares more punch because you care about the people experiencing them. In terms of humor, Annabelle, Creation mostly steers clear. It's not a film that lightens the mood with jokes or comic relief, which might disappoint viewers looking for that mix of scares and laughs. But this choice helps maintain a consistently eerie tone, reinforcing the film's serious approach to its subject matter. It's a film that wants you to stay on edge rather than giving you a breather with humor, and that's a bold decision that pays off in building atmosphere. The movie also plays with some genre expectations by flipping the usual final girl trope a bit. Without giving too much away, the characters' resilience and how they confront the evil presence challenge the typical helpless victim narrative. This adds a layer of empowerment and makes the story feel more dynamic than just a simple chase and scare sequence. Visually and thematically, the film taps into gothic horror elements with its old house, dark corners, and eerie shadows. This classic aesthetic isn't just window dressing. It's woven into the story's identity and enhances the sense of timeless menace. The production design and cinematography lean into these gothic vibes, reinforcing the genre's atmosphere and giving the film a distinctive style. So while Annabelle creation may not break every rule of the haunted doll playbook, it respects the genre's core while adding enough fresh details, emotional depth, and careful pacing to keep the experience engaging. It knows what horror fans want: creepy tension, unsettling imagery, and a doll that will haunt your dreams, while also giving them a richer story to invest in. It's a neat balance between honoring classic horror conventions and adding enough nuance to avoid feeling like just another generic scare fest. When you stack Annabelle creation up against other films in the haunted doll or supernatural horror genre, it's like walking into a familiar haunted house, but one that's been redecorated with some fresh, clever touches. Sure, it shares the usual creepy vibes and eerie setups that fans have come to expect from movies featuring possessed dolls, but it doesn't just settle for being a run-of-the-mill spook fest. Instead, it leans into building a richer backstory and atmosphere that sets it apart from many of its peers. Compared to the original Annabelle, 2014, this film steps things up by acting as a prequel, giving us a deeper dive into the origins of the infamous doll. Where the first film felt more like a straightforward haunted object tale, creation fleshes out the mythology, creating a more layered and immersive narrative. It's a smart move because it turns what could have been just another scare-at-every-turn flick into something with a haunting history that adds weight to the scares. Fans of the franchise get to see the doll's story unfold in a way that feels more substantial and less like a quick jump-scare machine. If you compare Annabelle creation to other horror movies in the Conjuring Universe, like The Conjuring or Annabelle, The Devil Made Me Do It, you notice it has a slightly different tone. It's slower and moodier, more focused on gothic horror vibes and emotional depth rather than high-octane scares or courtroom drama. This tonal shift gives the film its own identity within the franchise. It's less about the fast pace and more about building a simmering dread that creeps under your skin, which is a welcome change of pace for those who appreciate old-school horror atmospherics. When looking beyond the franchise to similar haunted doll movies, think Child's Play or Dead Silence, Annabelle, creation stands out for its serious tone and emphasis on storytelling. Unlike the sometimes campy or gimmicky approach of other doll horror flicks, this film aims for a more grounded emotional core. The focus on the orphans and their trauma gives the movie a human element that many similar films lack, making the horror feel more personal and impactful. From the director's perspective, David F. Sandberg is better known for his work on Lights Out and Shazam, so Annabelle creation fits interestingly into his filmography. It shows his ability to handle tension and atmosphere with a steady hand, using shadows and silence as effectively as loud scares. Compared to his other films, which range from superhero fun to tight, focused horror shorts, this one is his first deep dive into a larger franchise and period piece, showing a versatility that's impressive for a director still building his career. So, does Annabelle creation reinvent the haunted doll wheel? Not entirely. It respects the familiar formula, the creepy doll, the haunted house, the innocent victims, but it spices things up with richer storytelling, emotional depth, and a slower, moodier build-up of terror. It knows what horror fans want and delivers it with enough polish and nuance to stand out. When compared to its genre mates and franchise siblings, it carves out its own little niche by being a darker, more atmospheric chapter that balances scares with story in a way that keeps you hooked. It's like your classic horror doll story, but with an extra layer of creepy sophistication that makes you sit up and pay attention. Annabelle creation has a way of grabbing hold of its audience and pulling them into a roller coaster of emotions, even if it's not the kind of film that's going to make you laugh out loud or cry buckets. The emotional journey here is more about that creeping tension that slowly builds until your heart's pounding, your palms are sweaty, and you're hanging on every shadow on the screen. It's the kind of film that makes you jump, wince, and then hold your breath, all in the span of a few seconds, and that's a powerful way to keep viewers glued to their seats. What's interesting is that the film doesn't rely solely on cheap jump scares to get your attention. Instead, it uses atmosphere, character moments, and a creeping sense of dread that settles in your bones to create a feeling of unease that lasts well beyond the final credits. There's this constant undercurrent of fear mixed with sympathy for the characters, especially the children, which makes the scares hit harder because you genuinely care about what happens to them. It's that emotional investment that turns a simple haunted doll story into something much more gripping. There are moments that make your heart race, like when the doll suddenly appears in places you least expect, or when the quiet tension explodes into terrifying chaos. These shock moments are spaced out just right, giving you time to breathe and process the fear before plunging you back in again. It's a rhythm that keeps the adrenaline pumping without wearing out its welcome. And while there's not much room for humor, the film's emotional weight makes the scares feel more earned and meaningful. Beyond the fear factor, the film also invites viewers to connect with the characters on a deeper level. The struggles, fears, and hopes of the orphans create a kind of emotional resonance that can stay with you after the movie ends. Their innocence and vulnerability make the evil they face feel even more sinister, and that contrast adds a powerful emotional punch. It's the kind of story that makes you root for the characters and feel a genuine sense of relief or heartbreak as their fates unfold. Because of this emotional pull, Annabelle, creation often sparks conversations among fans about what really scared them or which scene stuck in their minds. It invites discussion about the doll's origins, the nature of evil, and how trauma shapes the characters, all topics that go beyond typical horror movie chatter. It's the kind of film that fans might want to watch again to catch the subtle details they missed the first time, or to experience that particular brand of suspense all over again. The film's emotional beats, combined with its effective scares, make it memorable. It's not just a fleeting thrill, it lingers in your mind, making you think twice before leaving a doll unattended or wandering into a dark, creaky old house. That lasting impact is a sign of effective audience engagement, when the movie becomes more than just background noise and instead becomes something that sticks with you, sparks your imagination, and maybe even gives you a good story to tell at the next gathering. So while Annabelle, creation might not have you laughing or crying buckets, it definitely knows how to play with your emotions in a way that's thrilling, immersive, and memorable. It hooks you with tension, deepens your investment with emotional moments, and keeps you talking long after the lights come up. That's a pretty solid win for a horror film, and it's what keeps audiences coming back for more. Annabelle, creation isn't just about a creepy doll moving on its own or jump scares popping out of nowhere. It's actually packed with symbolism and metaphors that add a spooky layer of depth beneath all the eerie visuals. If you pay attention, the film uses its haunting imagery and recurring motifs to tell a story that's about much more than just scares. First off, the doll itself is a powerful symbol. It represents lost innocence and the dangers lurking beneath what seems harmless and familiar. Dolls are childhood staples, meant to be comforting and safe, but here the Annabelle doll flips that idea on its head, turning innocence into something sinister. It's a perfect metaphor for how trauma and evil can infect the most vulnerable parts of our lives. The doll's pristine, almost porcelain-like face hides the dark forces inside, kind of like how people often hide pain and darkness behind a calm exterior. The house where much of the story takes place also acts as a symbol. It's this old, isolated place filled with secrets and shadows, almost like a physical representation of a character's minds, full of hidden fears, grief, and unresolved trauma. The way the house creaks, groans, and hides dark corners mirrors the emotional weight the characters carry. It's not just a backdrop, it's practically another character in the film, symbolizing the past's grip on the present. There's also an interesting use of light and darkness throughout the film that serves as a metaphor for knowledge and ignorance, safety and danger. The flickering candles, dimly lit rooms, and sudden shadows are more than just spooky atmosphere. They highlight the struggle between good and evil, hope and despair. When the characters are bathed in light, there's a brief sense of security, but as soon as darkness falls, all bets are off. This contrast amplifies the tension and reminds us how quickly comfort can turn to terror. Another subtle metaphor lies in the theme of creation itself, which is embedded in the film's title. It's not just about how the doll was made, but about how evil is created or born out of human actions, mistakes, or neglect. The film hints that evil is not always an outside force, but something that can take root through trauma, fear, and broken families. This idea gives the horror a psychological edge, suggesting that some monsters aren't born, they're made. Recurring motifs like the spinning music box, the cracked doll face, and the recurring imagery of broken toys all reinforce the fragility of innocence and the passage of time. These visual cues remind us that what was once whole and safe can be shattered, just like the characters' lives. The cracks in wear aren't just physical, they're emotional and spiritual, showing how trauma leaves lasting marks. The film also uses sound and silence symbolically. The moments of quiet before a scare aren't just about building tension, they echo the characters' moments of denial, the silence around their grief, and the way evil lurks in the background, waiting to burst out. Silence becomes a metaphor for the unspoken fears and secrets that haunt the family. When you start to unpack these layers, Annabelle, creation transforms from a straightforward horror story into a tale rich with symbolism and metaphor that deepens its themes. The creepy visuals, chilling sounds, and haunted spaces all work together to tell a story about lost innocence, trauma, and the shadowy places inside us all. It's like a dark fairy tale that uses every creepy doll and creaking door to whisper a deeper, more unsettling truth about human vulnerability and the monsters we carry within. Annabelle, creation slots into the larger Conjuring universe like a carefully placed puzzle piece, filling in backstory and adding depth to the creepy mythos that fans love. While the original Annabelle movie introduced us to the doll as a frightening presence, this film takes a step back and tells us exactly how that doll came to be such a vessel of evil, enriching the overarching narrative with a chilling origin story. It's like going behind the scenes in a haunted museum and discovering the dark history of one of its most infamous exhibits. For anyone who's followed the Conjuring films, this installment offers new layers that tie together loose threads and deepen the world building. The movie isn't just a standalone scarefest, it's a foundational chapter that sets the tone for everything that comes after in the franchise. The focus on the doll's creation and the tragic backstory of the family responsible grounds the supernatural elements in human tragedy, which is a recurring theme across the series. It reminds us that in this universe, evil isn't just some random force. It often has roots in pain, loss, and unintended consequences. This context makes the doll's later rampages in the other films feel more meaningful because we understand the origins of its malevolence. From a franchise standpoint, Annabelle, creation also pushes the timeline backward, exploring events that predate even the first Annabelle film. This prequel status means it plays a unique role by adding historical texture to the story rather than just expanding forward. It's like a flashback in a family saga, revealing secrets that explain why certain things are the way they are later on. This technique keeps the audience invested because it answers questions fans didn't even realize they had, and it enriches the franchise with new mysteries and lore to explore. When it comes to historical accuracy, since the film is loosely inspired by supposed real events connected to the Warrens' investigations, it maintains a degree of authenticity in its portrayal of the 1950s era. The set designs, costumes, and props all create an immersive experience that feels true to the time period, helping viewers step back into a world where faith, superstition, and post-war anxieties played a big role in people's lives. The old-fashioned homes, the style of the children's clothing, even the way the characters speak and behave, all contribute to a believable backdrop that grounds the supernatural story in a specific historical moment. This attention to period detail isn't just window dressing, it enhances the atmosphere, making the haunting feel more real because it's happening in a world that feels lived in and authentic. It's easier to suspend disbelief when the environment around the horror is so convincing, and the film uses this historical immersion to deepen the tension. The era's cultural attitudes toward religion, family, and the supernatural also add layers to the story, making the characters' fears and responses feel grounded in their time and place. So, Annabelle, creation serves double duty, both as a crucial chapter in the Conjuring Universe's sprawling saga and as a period piece that transports audiences to a very specific moment in American history. It enriches the franchise by filling in gaps, expanding the lore, and grounding its supernatural scares in a world that feels eerily familiar yet disturbingly haunted. This blend of franchise storytelling and historical atmosphere gives the movie a unique flavor, making it more than just another horror prequel but a key piece in a much larger, spooky puzzle. Annabelle, Creation was made on a relatively modest budget, especially when you consider the slick production values and the atmospheric quality it manages to deliver. Horror movies often don't need massive budgets to create real scares, and this film is a prime example of how smart filmmaking and a tight focus on mood and detail can make a smaller budget feel much bigger on screen. The sets, costumes, and practical effects all look polished and immersive, showing that the filmmakers knew how to stretch every dollar to build a genuinely creepy world without relying on flashy CGI or expensive blockbuster spectacle. When you look at the numbers, Annabelle, Creation definitely punched above its weight. The film grossed a significant amount worldwide, far exceeding its production budget, which immediately put it on the map as a solid financial success. For studios, horror films are often a sweet spot. They don't cost a fortune to make, but they can rake in big returns if they hit the right notes with audiences. This movie did just that. It attracted not only fans of the Conjuring Universe, but also general horror lovers who appreciate a well-crafted scare. Marketing played a big role in its box office performance. The promotional campaign was smartly tailored to build intrigue without giving too much away, which is crucial for a horror film where mystery and suspense drive audience interest. Teasers and trailers focused on the creepy doll and the haunting atmosphere, whetting the appetite of viewers while keeping the story under wraps. The connection to the popular Conjuring franchise was heavily emphasized in marketing materials, helping draw in an established fan base eager for more supernatural thrills. Audience reception also played its part in keeping the momentum going at the box office. Positive word of mouth about the film's effective scares, compelling backstory, and atmospheric tension encouraged more viewers to check it out. Horror fans often rely on recommendations from others who share their taste, and Annabelle, Creation benefited from this organic buzz. The film managed to satisfy those who came in for traditional jump scares, as well as those looking for a richer story, broadening its appeal. Comparing it to other entries in the Conjuring Universe, the film's box office performance fits well within the trend of successful but not blockbuster-level returns. It wasn't a massive blockbuster smash like The Conjuring itself, but it carved out a profitable niche, proving that there's a strong appetite for well-made horror prequels. Its success helped keep the franchise alive and growing, encouraging studios to continue investing in expanding this spooky universe. In short, Annabelle, Creation demonstrates how a horror movie doesn't need a blockbuster budget to make a big splash. Its production quality feels high-end despite the modest spending, and its financial returns reflect the perfect storm of smart marketing, solid audience reception, and franchise power. The film's box office journey shows that when it comes to horror, sometimes less really is more, especially when the scares are crafted with care and the story connects with viewers on a chilling level. If you're itching to experience Annabelle, Creation and get all wrapped up in its spooky, unsettling atmosphere, you have several options to dive into this horror tale depending on your style of viewing. Of course, the ultimate way to feel every jump scare and hear every creak in the haunted house is on the big screen in a movie theater. There's just something about watching a horror film in a dark theater with booming surround sound that makes every eerie moment hit harder. Those sudden sounds, flickering shadows, and tense silences really come alive when you're surrounded by other scaredy cats trying not to scream. But if the theater isn't an option, streaming services have you covered. Annabelle, Creation is available on several popular platforms where subscribers can watch it anytime they want. This convenience means you can get cozy at home, maybe with some popcorn or a blanket to hide under during the scarier scenes. Streaming also lets you pause if you need a break after a particularly intense moment or rewind to catch details that you missed the first time, which is perfect for horror buffs who love dissecting every creepy frame. For viewers who like a bit more control or don't subscribe to streaming services, digital rental or purchase is a great way to go. Platforms like Amazon Prime Video, Google Play Movies, Apple iTunes, and others offer the movie for rent or purchase, giving you instant access across devices. Renting is perfect for a one-time scare night, while buying lets you keep the film forever, ready to revisit when you want that chilling thrill again. Watching on a high-definition TV or a good projector at home enhances the experience, letting you soak in the eerie lighting and shadows that make the film's atmosphere so effective. If you want the best way to watch Annabelle, creation for maximum impact, try to set up an environment that mimics the theater vibe. Darken the room, crank up the volume on a decent sound system or headphones, and minimize distractions. The film plays with silence and sound in clever ways, so good audio is key to catching all the subtle cues that build tension. Watching it late at night when the house is quiet adds an extra layer of spookiness. You might find yourself glancing over your shoulder more than once. No matter how you choose to watch Annabelle, creation is ready to deliver its haunting story straight to your screen. Whether you're at home binging or braving the theater crowd, there's no shortage of ways to get lost in the creepy world of the cursed doll and the dark secrets behind its origin. So pick your favorite setup, settle in, and get ready for a scary ride that's as accessible as it is chilling.